eccentric, fantastic people, and they certainly fill a big gap in arts in the southeast of England. So there you are, Dandelion Charm, and that's who they are. Now let's get a bit serious, because I am ambivalent about what should be happening with coronavirus. I still haven't quite got around the pronunciations. Is it COVID or COVID? So I say Corona, hardly because Corona was a very popular pop when I was a child. You could get Dandelion and Burdock and all sorts of things. One was named Cream, as I recall, something Cream. And they were wonderful names for wonderful pops, fizzy drinks. Long before Coke was a gleam in anybody's eye in the United Kingdom. But they were all under the brand called Corona. So that's how I remember talking about the virus, coronavirus, fizzy pop. But fizzy pop has its downside. And it appears now that Leicester, with the East Midlands city of Leicester in the United Kingdom, in England in fact, has had 1,000 cases over the last week or two, and is now again in lockdown. And the warning is that there are at least 29 more communities around the United Kingdom being watched very closely because the signs are disturbing. And I just very quickly, while we were playing that record, looked into the news to see what was happening, and one of the items is about a village in Germany where the Germans just locked down an entire estate. There are 600 people locked in, to all intents and purposes, behind barbed wire. And the reason for that was that they were warned to self-isolate. And when police went to check, they found that Romanian workers had got their suitcases and were about to travel back to Romania. Well, of course, that's exactly the way that it spreads. Not me, Gov. I won't do it. These rules aren't for me. They're for somebody else. And of course, poor old Romanians are getting the blame. But the fact of the matter is, of course, we had thousands on our own beaches. We had thousands in all sorts of beauty spots. Not us, Gov. We can't do it. So suddenly there is the threat, and I say only the threat, because basically the containment has been pretty successful so far. But there is the threat that we actually might go back into another spike rather quicker than we thought. There are forecasts that come September, October, as the weather starts to change, that's when we have to be extra careful. But I think we still have to be extra careful right now. It is not a happy situation. It's not an easy situation. My fights with the local council, which are ongoing, believe me, whenever they see me coming, they duck. Nobody wants to deal with me because I'm difficult. But my fights with the local council have lifted in temper and motion just the last couple of days, because we are coming out of lockdown. We are beginning to spread our wings, but that means not only fun and jollity, and who knows what's going to happen next week. Are we going to get pubs, or aren't we? But not only jollity, but it brings its own type of responsibility. And we really do have to worry whether we are doing the right thing when we go and mix much more freely. Are we actually through the worst of this? Should we take still the extra precautions that we did during lockdown? Okay, I'm the first to admit that getting out in the last couple of days has been terrific, not least of which is I need the exercise as therapy for my Parkinson's. But yesterday it was the first time that I really held a meeting, face-to-face business meeting, and there is always that concern on behalf of my colleague, Annie Verrill, whom will be joining me as soon as we get used to where we can go and where we can't go next week on this radio station and on the television station, MiradorTelevision.com. If you haven't been to MiradorTelevision.com, give it a try. A bunch of nutcases, but nonetheless, we have fun and we hope that you share some of that fun. It's not only on MiradorTelevision.com, but if you've got a smart TV, you'll find us on Roku. Mirador Television. That's a funny name, isn't it? Mirador, what does it mean? Well, in Lewes, we have a fine classic example of a barbican, of a castle gateway, a castle keep, if you like. And everybody names their business after the barbican. So you've got Barbican this and Barbican that and Barbican the other. Well, we didn't want it to be Barbican Radio, Barbican Television, to be confused with somebody else who's selling carpets or whatever. And so we looked around for a synonym. And Mirador means a little barbican or a little turret. And since we are, as we say, small, but we are the biggest tiny television and radio company in the world. The biggest tiny radio company in the world, and that's now our mantra. So we latched on to Mirador, which is a tiny turret. So from the tiny turret, we send out to the world our fighting folk. Armour, swords, you name it. But we can't fight the virus. Nobody can fight the virus except us as individuals, and to behave responsibly. Incidentally, it's funny how things pass out of fashion. 20 or 30 years ago, if you were at a dinner party and you talked about movies and novels and so on, and you said The Mouse That Roared, everybody would know exactly what you were talking about. Well, it occasionally pops up on television. The Mouse That Roared with Peter Sellers. And it's worth a watch because it's very funny. And what it reminded me of it was the fact that I just talked about armour, that we go out with our swords and our shields and so on and so forth. And the Duchy of Grand Fenwick, its economy, and it was one of those little duchies left over from the merger of various areas in France to form the whole country. It's left behind, and it's got a very English demeanour to it. But Pinot is the only enterprise factor in its economy that gives it its cash. And Pinot Grand Fenwick is bought the world over, and they have a crop disaster. So they have to decide where they're going to get their money from, and they decide that what they'll do is they'll invade the United States. They'll lose, and they will then get aid from the Marshall Plan, and their economic problems will be over. So they hire an old tramp steamer, put on all their ancient armour, which is all they've got left in the duchy, and go and invade the United States. And when they get to New York, they discover that it's in lockdown because they are having an atom bomb, which they did in those days, an atom bomb rehearsal, so that everybody was tucked away in basements and cellars and so on. There's not a soul there. So they plant their flag, declare victory, and come home, much to the chagrin of the Chancellor of the Duchy of Grand Fenwick, because he's now not going to get his cash. They won. They beat the United States, so they can't get the Marshall Plan. They can't get aid from the United States. But they actually picked up, by chance, a mad scientist, who has developed a new bomb. And they brought him back, and they've got the bomb. So everybody wants to know Grand Fenwick. It's a very funny story, and it really is well played by Peter Sellers, who plays the Duchess and the Prime Minister and the hero, all three of them. I've forgotten his name now. I think he's Gully. It may be that I've got that wrong, but still, do dip in if you see it. The Mouse That Roared. Wonderful, wonderful movie. If you raise that name now in any society, very few people, except those like me, who remember peculiar things from the past, they don't remember these wonderful movies. They don't remember these wonderful stories. You can actually still find a copy of the story in book form if you look around some of the antique book shops, which I suppose next week you'll be able to do. Anyway, I've rammed on, haven't I? What shall I play now? Let's have a look. Oh, there's one here called Potato Deal. I have no idea what that's about. So let's see what Potato Deal is. Quite interesting, a catchy little thing. Potato Deal, and I mean that got me sort of tapping my toes and wiggling my bottom in the seat as I march forth to the end of this programme, because it's amazing where a half hour goes, but we've been doing this now for 27 and a half minutes and we've only got 30. Just a quick word about the pubs opening next week, because I hope that a friend of mine alerted me yesterday. He's a member of the Groucho Club, which is media people in London, and they are reopening next week. And we both are watching to see what happens, because life isn't going to be the same. With all distancing and not being able to belly up to a bar and so on. I belong to the Travellers Club, which is a club of about 200 years old on Pall Mall in London, and it's one of my favourite, if not my favourite, watering holes. The Duke of Wellington and several worthies, including Talleyrand, who was the French foreign minister who wrote the rules of diplomacy, which hold still in diplomatic circles, were founder members. And I just wonder whether I'll be able to get back there next week, or what I will find, what will be different. So we're coming into a different era, I think. Perhaps it will be exciting, perhaps it will be different, perhaps it will be depressing. Who knows? The only thing is, what we have to do is to stick our noses ahead and say we will accept how society has changed, how society has had to change, and that we will get on with it, and from that perhaps we'll develop a better society. I hope we will, anyway. I hope that I was getting, along with many, many of my fellow citizens, frustrated by the antics of some of the institutions, be that government, be that bankers, be that civil servants, be that the military, the police. I hope that what will happen is we will now see significant change once we realise that we can't control everything and that nature has its say. That's it for this morning. Keith Hayes, Rouser Radio, and here we go to see us out with Bensound and Buddy. Wowzer Radio out of Lewes in the United Kingdom. Keith Hayes, Catch Mirador Television.